Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Life by Design podcast. On this week's episode, I talk with Damien Bohler. Damien is the founder, co-director, and facilitator of Evolve Relating, offering a path to explore intimacy and relationship as a vehicle for evolution, healing, and growth. Damien has postgraduate studies in counseling and psychotherapy and has been facilitating and teaching relational and transformational work for more than 13 years. He uses various modalities, including attachment theory, somatic therapy, gene keys, and human design to support clients to create the most incredible relationship they ever knew was possible. In this week's episode, expect to learn about the importance of vulnerability, developing polarity, how your attachment style is showing up for you, how to navigate conflict resolution, and much, much more. Enjoy the episode. Now, guys, before we start this week's episode of the podcast, I want to talk to you about the Life by Design Mastermind. The Life by Design Mastermind is the mastermind for go-getters and high achievers who are looking to create a more successful, fulfilling, and balanced life by design. If you're serious about transforming your life, achieving your goals, and living a life on your terms, then the Life by Design is your golden ticket. Head over to the show notes and click on the link for more details about the program. Damien Bohler, welcome to the podcast.
G'day. Great to be here.
My friend, the last time I reckon I saw you, I think, and we didn't even get a chance to speak there, but it was at Seb's house.
Seb's house.
He had a random thing in Brunswick Head. Pretty sure?
Yeah, right.
That was the last time.
Which Seb are you referring to?
Seb and Jade?
Seth.
Seth.
Yeah.
Seth.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't get it. There. Brunswick Heads. 4 years ago, I reckon.
Yeah. It's been a while.
We are half a degree of separation with lots of like-minded friends. And mate, I have been loving your stuff over the last, I think, 3 or 4 months. I don't know if something shifted at your end. I'm interested in hearing your story, but it's just been popping up in front of me. I don't know if you kind of really stepped up your social game or whatever it is, but it's been popping up left, right, and center for me. And I've been loving it. Hence the reason we're here today talking. Mate, can you give the guys a 60 to 90-second spiel of who you are and what's got you to where you are today?
Who I am, it's always a tough question to answer. I mean, I guess my story around working in the field of intimacy and relationships like I do often started as a lot of people who become kind of experts in their field from a lot of suffering and a lot of struggle and a lot of challenges. I was not very well off with the ladies when I was young. I had a lot of hurt, rejection, humiliation in early stages. And I went on a long journey of trying to sort that out. From an early age, I knew that I wanted relationship. And it took me a long time to get myself to a place where I could have the kind of intimacy and relationship that I wanted. And so really, when it comes to this work, it's been just, a personal journey of like more than 20 years of like trying to understand what it is to be a man and how it is to relate to a woman and what it is to create a relationship that is functional, healthy, thriving, deep, intimate, conscious, whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
Intimacy is such a loaded word, loaded term, loaded meaning, of which most blokes at some stage are probably told they need more of it. But like, what does that even look like for someone to start? Like, where does someone even learn to start becoming more intimate?
So it's like you said, it's loaded because it's actually complex. Relationship, this is something that this is the tack that I'm taking more and more, and I'm going to be speaking about it more and more, is like relationship is actually like a set of skills. It's a meta skill that encompasses like a lot of sub skills, right? Just like businesses, in order to do business, you need to know accounting and finance and marketing and sales and operations and teams and all of these things. Relationships the same. You need to learn how to have sex. You need to learn how to be vulnerable and intimate. You need to be able to negotiate what it's like to live together. Like you need to understand your attachment styles and trauma and triggers and conflict and polarity and romance and all of this stuff. So it's kind of like where are we stuck would be the first place to go. And then the other tangent. So like one is like any of those areas to deepen into. And the other is the idea of intimacy itself. And so that kind of like piqued my interest is like intimacy. I like the word because it's often we play with into me, you see, right? Intimacy, into me, you see. It's this like fun little play that gives us a glimpse into what it is. But essentially, it's the experience of being known for who you are and knowing someone else. That's what intimacy is. When a woman says, I want more intimacy, she's like, I want you to know me more deeply and I want to know you more deeply. That's literally all she's saying. And a lot of the time, the conversation is the man doesn't know how to open up. He doesn't open up. He doesn't share what's going on inside of me, or he's not curious around what's inside of her. So vulnerability is usually a really good starting point.
It's an interesting term and thought that many women have, and I'd be fascinated in your take on it. Having had a lot of conversations on both sides of the fence, men and women, it's really interesting how common it is of like, he doesn't know how to open up. And what I've actually found, my experience, I'm interested in yours, is factually, that's actually not correct. And there's been a lot of onus on men don't know how to open up. And what I'm kind of experiencing is if they're in the right setting, they're actually, most of them are a lot more capable than we've given them credit for. And there's probably a little bit of responsibility on women to develop the skill set required that has him kind of open up. What's been your experience?
Yeah, I would say, I would say that there is probably a cultural context where vulnerability for men isn't so accepted, but I think we're leaving that era behind. Like that's a lot of the trends that we see get really loud on their way out. That's the interesting thing. They seem to get loudest when they're actually starting to be fully left behind. So yes, men historically weren't opened up. There's this stoicism and so forth. But like you said, given the right circumstances and setting, a lot of men will open up. And that right setting is to be listened to. It's like one of the things when I started this work, I actually started teaching about authentic relating. That was kind of my main background. And something that I really came to is like pretty much everyone is starving for attention. Very few people actually get listened to. And most conversations are simply just waiting for the other person to finish talking so you can talk, right? Yeah. And so sometimes when women are saying to men, he doesn't need to open up, I would question, are you actually giving him space? Are you interested in him? Are you listening to him? Are you asking a question and then waiting enough time? Sometimes for a man, and I know this is true for myself, to locate how I feel or think about something takes a little bit of time. I have to go in and I have to kind of like, it's almost like there's I have to go walk down to the basement and have it turn the lights on and start moving some boxes around and go, where is that thing? And by the time I go, I think it's here, she's moved on. She's not interested anymore, or like I've taken too long and suddenly I'm in trouble for not opening up. But when there's a bit more space or the skill of listening that's been developed by both parts. And I see women as impaired in their listening ability as men, generally. It's not a gendered thing. I think that the ability to be vulnerable and the ability to listen in a way that allows the other person to share themselves is ungendered. I would say it's across the board, people can develop those skills. So yeah.
I'd say knowing how many people we have in common in terms of a wider community, but not enough. Your answer to this question might be slightly skewed, but I'll be interested in it all the same. How many people in your world would you classify as elite listeners who have you fully seen, heard, and understood? I'm guessing you're around a lot of emotionally talented people, so your numbers might be skewed to the average person, but I'd still be interested.
You'd think that, and still, I'm going to say very low. Even in the communities and circles that I spend time in, I find that doing a lot of personal development work doesn't necessarily improve one's listening ability unless they spend time doing it. You can get really good at talking about yourself, but that doesn't mean you're a better listener. So pretty low, actually. The people who I know are good listeners have usually done training. They've done authentic relating training. They've done some kind, like genuinely gone, I need to develop my skills here, and done that. And I mean, in terms of like people who I've really felt listened to and seen and heard by, it's like my wife, part of the reason why I married her, and a couple of close friends who I actually did authentic relating with. Other than that, even some of my closest friends, I don't necessarily feel unless I put in the effort to take up space. And that's something that I learned. I started teaching authentic relating because I was frustrated by how poorly people listened. And I was like, maybe if I start teaching people how to listen, I'll get better listened to. I realized the other half of the equation is taking up space and being able to express ourselves. And I wasn't very good at that. So I've learned to take up a lot more space. So I'll share what I want to share, whether the other person is, and I will guide their question or I'll guide it towards the place that I want to go. But in terms of actually drawing me out and asking me questions and exploring me in a way where I'm like, like I'd never been asked that before. I have to like really discover something new about myself in order to answer. Not that many. It's small still, you know, it's an underdeveloped skill collectively.
It's an underdeveloped skill. It's also a fucking superpower if you can
Superpower.
develop it. And again, I often think, I'm very fortunate to have a huge amount of emotionally intelligent people in my world. And there's two that if shit was really gnarly, or if, we had to explore the deepest of my dark psyche and just hold the purest of place or space, there'd be two people. So it really, again, if you can develop the skill set, you become so magnetic. And often people can't, I don't know if this is your experience. Obviously, this is your skill set, but I'm guessing that people won't be able to put their finger necessarily on the pulse as to what created this incredible connection, even if it's 10 minutes. But the skills, like you just leave that conversation, you're like, I don't know what just happened, but like something was different about that conversation.
Yeah. And when you learn to listen and relate more effectively, those conversations become just natural. They become part. Sometimes I forget with my wife, the caliber of conversation we have is just so mundane and part of our life that I forget that that's not actually the general experience. Like that's just what it's like all the time. And I just wanted to tag that superpower thing. It's like listening makes you a better coach, a better therapist, a better partner, a better facilitator, a better teacher, a better leader, a better manager. It's across the board. Better data. If you're a good listener, you're people, you stand out on dates, you stand out in relationships, you can troubleshoot, you can problem solve, like everything. Yeah.
It's a valid point because I probably relate it most to intimate relationships, but as you spoke to so nicely, it's across the board. The taking up space one's really interesting. As you said that, I felt kind of a little bit of charge because I have taken up space in very dysfunctional ways previously. But even as you're speaking to that, I realize when I've got something brewing, firstly, my partner often picks it up before me. Secondly, I'm still forming it and when she wants an answer. And thirdly, I'm often waiting for the invitation from her to like, what's going on for you, as opposed to taking up space and stepping into that. Are they common themes that you see a bit of?
Yeah, it can be. And it's interesting. Like, I love that you circled back around to that, because taking up space, can be seen with that charge or that negative bias, because we can do it in a dysfunctional way where we're just loud and we just kind of blurt out everything. I guess what I mean is like, just like the skill of listening is one skill we develop, the skill of vulnerability is another skill, which is really expressing in a powerful way. And vulnerability is a skill because it's something we can develop. There's like when I'm going to be vulnerable, there's always going to be an edge, right? It's like, ooh, like this is a little bit uncomfortable, right? And so when we develop the skill of vulnerability, we get really good at being able to share from that edge. And that edge is the thing that is the most magnetic. Whenever someone gets up on a stage and they're genuinely vulnerable, everyone drops everything and listens to them, right? When they're in that, it's so magnetic. And so we can get more and more used to being able to share from that. And again, when a woman says he's not opening up, what she's wanting is to feel that. And then there's a whole taking up space can be misconstrued as just being boisterous. Vulnerability can also be misconstrued as being overly emotionally wet, like always in pain or sharing about how hard your life is. That's not vulnerability. Vulnerability is just anything that is. Vulnerability can be joyful. Vulnerability can be like sharing with someone that I had a big win in my life. That's vulnerable edge, right? Asking someone out on a date is vulnerable, right? Yeah.
That's really valuable. I just felt my brain readjust off the back of that. What do you mean by, what was the word you used? Something wet when it comes to vulnerability?
Emotionally wet.
That's fucking excellent. Can you expand on that for me?
Just popped out of my head. I've never said that before.
I fucking loved it. Can you expand on that for me?
I mean, I think it's like when we become over-identified with kind of, again, I'm like going with the theme, like soggy emotions, like kind of self-pitying or victimhood, right? Like, woe is me, poor me. When we become emotionally over-identified with those experiences and we kind of sit in them all the time and we share them all the time, it's no longer vulnerable. If it's not uncomfortable, if I'm not revealing, like if you've heard me complain about how bad my life is for the past 6 months and I haven't done anything about it, I'm not being vulnerable. I'm just being victimhood.
That is excellent. I think the other thing that I find really interesting about vulnerability in the world of social media is like staged vulnerability.
Yeah.
You put out a post that you kind of know is telling a bit of a story. It might even be a former story. So there's almost like a hero element to it, and you kind of position it as vulnerability, but really you know that it's going to get a standing ovation and kind of position you as a hero. I'm guessing that's a different type of vulnerability as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like performative vulnerability. If you're not feeling, if you're about to put a post out there and you're not going, oh, I don't know about this one, then it's not vulnerable. If you're like, I can't wait for everyone to read this and give me some acclaim, it's not being vulnerable, right?
So what does taking up space look like? Like if someone, because again, my mind automatically went to the dysfunctional ways in which I've taken up space previously, but what does a healthy form of taking up space look like?
Yeah, I mean, like it'd be, for example, going to my partner and saying like, hey, like there's something churning inside of me. Could you give me some attention for a little bit? It could be like, like sharing what's on my mind with somebody. It could be in a conversation, interjecting with something that feels really important for me to share, right? Or even taking the conversation in a direction that's like genuinely interesting to me. Things like that. Yeah. I just want to add one more piece to it. I would say taking up space is when we are able to authentically like show more of us. And that means like the real us, not the performer us, as you kind of have alluded to, not the us that we habitually do because we know the kind of attention it gets. I'm the provoker, I'm the joker, I'm the whatever it is, and I do that, and I know what I get from it. It's predictable. When I show up as like, this is me, like this is actually me. This is what's important to me. This is what I care about. This is what I want to talk about. I want to be heard in this experience, right? That's what I would say, taking up space. And I would say when we take up space in a healthy way, it doesn't impose on anyone else's space. And that's a real art. I can see you kind of chewing on that one, right? And listening is the same. It's like if I can listen in a way that's deeply embodied, you get to show up more fully as you, but I don't diminish myself to make room for it. I actually, if anything, get bigger and I match you. It's almost like we're overlapping in a multidimensional space rather than like competing for the available space. So it's like, if I can show up in a way that doesn't diminish you, I would say that's, and taking up space isn't quite the right term for it, now as we're like getting into the more nuance. But if I can show up in a way where you're like, I can show up more too here, and we're not, like two rams, like going, this is my territory.
And again, you're rejigging. There's been a number of your posts over the last 3 to 4 months that have like helped me kind of rejig my mind. That's what you've just said then is another one of like my association to taking up space is diminishing or shrinking someone else. So it's really interesting that you're again kind of bringing that forward, because I can only assume, correct me if I'm wrong, there's other people that feel the same as the feeling that I just had come up. Yeah. What's your belief on polarity? Because I've seen a couple of your posts that have broken apart my relationship and perception of polarity, and I've really enjoyed them. But what's the kind of standard position on polarity, and how is your position slightly different?
I would say the standard position on polarity goes, men are this way, and in order to be masculine, they should do this set of characteristics. And they're usually things like leading, certainty, choosing where you go for dinner, paying, providing, protecting, etc., which is all valid. And I'm not going to take away from any of that. And women are this way, and they should be like this. They should be submissive, and they should be followers, and they should be, more emotional and whatever, right? And it's like, I would say the position on polarity is generally an identity-based position. You are identified with your polarity. If you're a man and you want to be masculine, you have to be identified as this set of polarities. Now, the way that I like to look at polarity is in two different ways. So I want to like unpack two different lenses. I really like to pull this apart and add lots of nuance to it. One lens is that polarity is something that shows up developmentally at different stages in different ways. So we are on a cultural developmental evolution, right? We started off as kind of probably solitary beings traversing the savannah, maybe finding one mate and looking after a child and trying to not die. And then we went, let's clump together as groups and create tribes and we'll survive better. And then after that, hang on, I don't want to be stuck in a tribe. Let's be more individual, and we had like larger, you had Genghis Khan and those kind of areas. And then we had kind of the church come along, and we had kind of a faith-based and structured kind of justice system and everything. Then we had the Industrial Revolution. So we've been through these evolutions, and each stage, developmental stage, and we go through them when we're born, we go through those stages quite quickly as well. We actually go through versions of those in our own individual kind of development through childhood into an adult. And each of those stages has a different set of values, behaviors, and structures to it. And polarity tends to show up differently at different stages. So a lot of what is called polarity right now, and some of the more aggressive polarity coaches out there who promote kind of like hardcore polarity, exists at a particular stage, the stage of around when the church arose. It's very traditional, and we also call it 1950s. Kind of was strong in that. We had a traditional based work ethic as well. You go to your company and you work for 50 years until you retire, and you get your gold watch, and you get married, and it's for life, right? And she stays home and looks after the kid in the house, and he goes off to work and provides and protects. And so there's an imposition on that value set and saying that this is polarity, right? This is what polarity is. It's just a polarity set at a particular developmental stage. As we progress out of that, polarity starts changing a little bit. Polarity becomes about status, the man with the most money and the woman with the biggest, fakest tits and, plastic surgery, the trophy wife and the status husband, right? Like that becomes a polarity set, right? He becomes extremely dominant and status oriented, and she becomes kind of submissive in a way, right? And then we move into another stage where we go, fuck all of that, and try and dismantle the whole damn thing. And you get a lot of that, right? People who go, there is no difference between men and women, and polarity is a construct, and gender is a construct, and we're all the same. It's just another value system, right? It's just another value set. I know I'm going on a little bit of a ramble here, but I'll wrap this one last bit up. So we can see that polarity changes depending on our developmental altitude, kind of where we are on the stage. And as we develop higher than that stage where we start tearing it all apart is doing something very important. It's helping us learn to kind of break free of rigid identities, which is why it's so concerned with, like getting rid of the idea of man and woman, and I can be whatever gender pronoun that I want, right? It's helping us like shake loose the ego constructed identity, which is an important developmental feature. Once we start doing that, then not at that stage, at the next stage, we start unfolding the capacity to see polarity as a tool versus an identity. And that's where I get really interested. Polarity is a set of qualities or attributes that I can put on like a jacket at any given moment to create an outcome. I can walk down the other end of the house into my wife's bedroom, and I can just like take on a really dominant penetrative energy, and she's going to have a physiological response to that and an energetic response to that. Or I can sit in a kind of like really deep presence with her, and she'll respond to that. So I have access to these states, these state tools that are masculine, and they have a feminine counterpart. And when we inhabit them relationally, we create energy, and it's usually romantic erotic energy is the thing that we're interested in a relationship, because polarity is essentially just two opposing poles creating an energy. You get a plus and a minus magnet, and they create a magnetic force to each other. It's the same thing applied to relationship.
So am I hearing you correctly in saying that the way that you look at it and potentially the ideal outcome is not polarity is the issue, but more so our attachment and the way that we identify so rigidly towards it?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the relationship challenges that are seen are not actually polarity issues. I don't think you can start addressing polarity until you deal with attachment issues, which is more about trauma. I've been to, in the past couple of years, I went to a number of the top polarity teachers, people like Data and John Wineland and some others. I went to a bunch of their retreats and workshops and stuff. Almost every question from participants was an attachment related question. Almost every single question. People were not asking polarity questions. They were not struggling from polarity issues. They were struggling from attachment issues. And that was very interesting to me to see. I'm like, oh, these people are not even ready to begin addressing their polarity. They're not even, and then kind of like suiting up and putting on this like strong masculine thing doesn't deal with the fact that I'm emotionally avoidant or emotionally anxious, or, those are where the ruptures in the relationship start generating themselves.
So, I mean, on the surface level, you've got, four types depending how they're positioned when it comes to attachment styles. Just explain that to me. That's really interesting. So what were the most kind of common themes that you saw people asking around attachment styles, and how is it that it's worth us addressing those before we even explore polarities?
So I can't remember, like it was a couple of years ago was the last one that I went to, but mostly conflict-based things. And like when we go back to that, like he doesn't open up can be an attachment issue. If I have an avoidant nervous system, if my nervous system is avoidantly wired, it's very difficult for me to share what's on inside of me because the fear of rejection from that is so deeply buried is too painful. So I can't share what's inside of me, right? That's not a masculine stoicism thing. That's an avoidant thing. Or, she's constantly reaching and needing more of his attention. And he's like, Jesus, I want more space, right? It's not necessarily a polarity thing. And the thing to recognize is there this anxious avoidant relationship, and it's almost ubiquitous that avoidant types will get into relationship with anxious types and vice versa. It's almost ubiquitous. It's very rare that the same attachment style will get into relationship with each other. And if they do, one of them will flip more often than not, or the relationship disintegrates pretty quick because it's a polarity. It's actually a polarity. The anxious and the avoidant is a polarity. And so it's creating energy. What energy is it creating? It's creating romantic, erotic energy. It's creating sexual chemistry. A lot of what people are running their relationship on is a wounded or dysfunctional approach to their sexual chemistry, which is the anxious avoidant dance. You play that out for too long, you get in a trauma loop, you get in the fuck and fight cycle, which is like you break up, then you make up and you have hot, passionate make-up sex, and then you break up again because that's the energy that's fueling the eros in the relationship. So we have to kind of heal that before we can switch to a cleaner fuel, which is the polarity that I was talking about before, which then fuels the erotic chemistry. So the erotic chemistry is not, I'm constantly teetering on the edge of breakup, which is what has me super attracted to this person. That's a good way to burn our nervous systems out. It's like, I feel so safe and comfortable with my partner. Now I go into a masculine state and she gets turned on, right?
Fascinating. Just like the anxious avoidant as a form of polarity has just struck an absolute chord with me. What's your take on healing an anxious or an avoidant attachment style? Like, where does someone even start? Because there's a lot of talk and a lot of awareness around it.
Yeah.
But there's also often not a huge amount of like solutions being presented for it. So where do you go with that?
Yeah, I'm actually like midway through a course that I'm running on it right now. So I would say the first step of it is awareness. And awareness isn't necessarily just learning all about the features of an avoidant or anxious. And most people, they learn about attachment so they can diagnose their partner and blame them for their attachment style. It doesn't heal anything. It doesn't heal anything to do that. And that's mostly what I see happening. And it's anxious people out there learn all about it and go, you're avoidant. That's the reason why I'm struggling. No, you're struggling because you're anxious and you're drawn to people with an equally energetically charged nervous system to play out your trauma with. And you will keep doing that until you heal yourself. They're not going to do that for you. You can't go and find the secure person because the secure person doesn't want to spend their life healing you. Right. It's the hard truth that people need to kind of like get into. So it's awareness of our own like dysfunctional patterns. And I say dysfunctional like gently because I don't want to make people wrong for it. These are adaptations that occurred to deal with unfavorable environmental circumstances when we were children. We were doing the best that we could, but we have to understand what we are doing at an emotional and mental, somatic, energetic level. We have to actually start being aware of our reactive process and seeing that. And as we start seeing it and we start identifying it and recognizing it, we create enough space to then do something different. And it's the doing something different that is what heals us. And in the doing something different is like a lot of repetitions, right? We developed our anxious or our avoidant nervous system because we got hit with the same circumstance from our mom and dad hundreds, if not thousands of times, right? We had the same like interaction. We were neglected or emotionally invalidated or something over and over and over and over again. So we adapted to it. Our brains are neuroplastic. We adapt to any pressure you apply to it over time. We create an adaptation to it. So we have to create a new pressure over time so we can adapt in a different direction. So we have to understand what is our dysfunctional adaptations, and then we create counterintuitive behavioral patterns to like recorrect it. And then we just have to do them over and over and over and over again. For example, if I'm more avoidant, I have to bite the bullet and actually share what I'm feeling or say that I need something, right? For an avoidant, it's like, I don't need anything or anyone for anything, right? That's not true. That's an adaptation. So I have to learn to go, hey, I need to be heard. Shit. Oh my God, the first time an avoidant does that, they're gonna glitch out. They're gonna go into like some kind of flashback experience because it's not actually a comfortable process healing. It's uncomfortable.
It's interesting. What's your former attachment style potentially, or how
Anxious.
are you? Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah,
so you
anxious.
get it. And I don't know your relationship history, but I look at mine previously, and as anxious avoidant, it's fucking exhausting.
Oh my God, it's terrible.
I look at former relationships, and I came into this one with a limiting belief. It was early stages of my coaching business, and I came into this relationship with a limiting belief that I couldn't build a coaching business and a relationship at the same time, because based on previous relationships, I couldn't. I was so fucking consumed by my relationship with this anxious avoidant playing out that it was like paralyzing. And then I don't know about you, I used to look at relationships, and this is before I understood attachment styles, and I was like, how the fuck do they make it look so easy? So you can imagine there's two people that are secured together, just like doing relationships as if it's a piece of piss. And I'm like, what skills have they got that I don't? And upon reflection and hindsight, like security or a secure attachment style must make life and relationships so much easier. Is that your experience?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And what you suggested then about healing the anxious nervous system, right? And I can't have a job, I can't work or create a business and have a relationship at the same time. That is the epitome of an anxious nervous system, right? And the counterintuitive behavior, the healing journey of the anxious person is to develop their own autonomy, to develop their sense of self separate from the relationship, which is, I have my own business, right? I do things without my partner. I do things without even thinking about her. I have my own friends or my own hobbies. That's actually how an anxious person heals. When the avoidant booty calls them at, like last minute on Friday, and they've already got plans with their friends, and they go, ditch my friends, I'm going over there. They're perpetuating the pattern, right? I'm simply wiring in my anxiety pattern. When I go, no, sorry, I've already got plans with my friends, I'm healing myself because I'm doing something opposite than my adaptation wants me to do. I'm creating a new adaptation.
That's fascinating. So when you look at your relationship to relationships, how long have you and your partner been together?
Over 3 years now.
3 years. So let's use the last 3 years as an example, and maybe say a relationship 10 years ago and the amount of evolution that you've kind of moved through. What are some of the differences between, I guess, you before and after? I'm mindful that you're always a work in progress, but what are some of the differences in terms of how you relate that you're noticing?
Oh man, it's like night and day. There was a relationship over 10 years ago now. This is where I didn't know about attachment for a long time after this relationship, but there was a period of time, like once I used to go through this journey when I'd get into a relationship, and the first year I'd kind of be all right. And then something would hit and I would become completely consumed. My attachment would kick in and then I would be an absolute mess. When she left the room, like we'd be in a room together and she'd go into the kitchen to cook or something, I would have panic attacks when she left the room. I would start like having heart palpitations. I'm like, what is wrong with me? And I had no ability to do anything else other than work, and we worked at the same place as well, and be with her, and there was nothing else. And I didn't have any sense of self, I think is the main thing. Like everything was about her. So now I feel like I enjoy a lot of closeness with my partner, my wife, and I'm also like really comfortable being on my own. Right? We sleep in separate bedrooms. We have separate bedrooms. We share the same bed a couple of nights a week whenever we feel like it. That would have been unthinkable to me in the past.
Why do you, Shani and I do that as well. Probably 3 or 4 nights a week we sleep in separate beds. Why do you guys do it?
Just to like have our own space. Partly like having our own bedroom means I get to have my bedroom. It's like, I get to design my own bedroom and it's like my space for a good night's sleep. Sometimes you kind of energetically disrupt each other a little bit. And I think just so we have our own space, it just feels nice. It feels nice. And then, when we sleep together, it feels like a treat. It feels like something nice to do together.
Isn't it? I don't know if you've got
I love it.
Us, dude, we fucking love it.
Yeah. Yeah. We
And
would never do it different ever again.
I know. I can't
Yeah.
imagine with kids coming if things were ever change. But it's
Yeah.
interesting because people like are so confused by the fact that we sleep in
Yeah.
separate beds. They're like, "Do you guys fight?" Like the immediate thought, and I can only assume it's potentially the same for you, is like, "Oh, you're sleeping in separate rooms. You must be fighting." And we're like, "No, we are fucking good to go. We just
Yeah.
love like a few nights." Is that like the response that you've
Yeah.
had?
I don't know if I've had a lot of people respond in those ways, maybe because I so proudly proclaim it. I don't give them any room to question it, Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, it just feels much better, and especially just like having my own room. I love like my room's like all zen, I've got tatami mats on the floor and my mattress is like low down and it's like super zen, and hers is much more fluffy and pink. And, so it's like we get our own masculine, feminine rooms as well, right? And kind of represent our own personality there.
What do you do so much work on relating? What do you notice, like if someone wanted to start relating better, because you don't know what you don't know, and I'm guessing based on what I've seen, they're like, oh yeah, I communicate. Like there's just a lack of awareness as to what good communication looks like or even good listening. But if someone wanted to take things to the next level in terms of the way they relate, what are some of the more common threads and themes that you see that are really blocking people from relating better and deeper?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm currently in the process of writing a small ebook, like a kind of lead magnet thing about this, and doing a small course on it.
Let me know
I
when you
see,
do, because I'll buy it straight away.
yeah, it's free. It'll be a free one. Even better, you can buy it with your email address. So I've been breaking this down into sets of skills that go up in complexity, right? They go up, meaning that you have to kind of have the base ones sorted because they kind of add to the ones above them, right? And so the most basic ones are like nervous system regulation, which includes emotional intelligence, right? It's like the ability to manage our own emotional and kind of nervous system state, right? If you can't manage your triggers, if you can't find your center when you're thrown off center, and start also processing your own trauma, your old trauma, which is a skill, right? It's like actually learning to dig in and heal your own wounds is a skill anyone can develop. So we usually think you need to go to a therapist to get fixed up, but it's like if you get a cut on your arm or you break your arm, a doctor might plaster it, but you heal it, right? The doctor doesn't heal it. He just immobilizes it for you and you heal it. It's the same thing with our trauma. The therapist may provide the plaster that gives our being the opportunity to start healing, but we heal it ourselves. If we learn how to do that healing process ourselves, we can just now start doing it as an ongoing journey. So nervous system regulation is both acute, being triggered in the moment, being able to find center, and chronic, being able to address chronic issues and start to clean them up. And that's often a long process, right? That's a multi-year journey. It's like, in the business world, you're often like taught to try and promote fast solutions. And the reality is when it comes to relationship, I'm like, I can't. Like if you want a healthy relationship, expect to dedicate 2 to 5 years of your life, like seriously working at it. Same as if you're going to start a successful business, you're not going to do it in one weekend and be like, sweet, making $1 million a year. It's like, doesn't work that way. So boundaries, another one. So these are kind of baseline ones, and they both tie into a sense of self or self-esteem, self-worth. It's like you can't really have the foundations for a thriving relationship until we like ourselves. If you don't like yourself, you can't outsource that to someone else. It doesn't work. It's an endless void that will create challenges. And then we move into, now we can look up from ourselves and see the other and actually learn how to communicate. Now we learn how to listen and express ourselves. And then there's a third communication skill that I call attuning, which is like how we become present, like it's a we-based skill. It's when we become present to the experience that we're having, and we kind of get into an attuned field. It's often what feels like intimacy. Those are those conversations where you're like, whoa, like 3 hours just went by. It's like you get into an attuned state. It's like a we experience. Then we can start going into, again, conflict navigation, being able to negotiate. When you get into a relationship, you have to negotiate values and needs and desires, how you're going to parent the kids and where you're going to live. These are things you have to be able to do effectively with a partner, because once you decide to live with someone, it's like you now have to negotiate pretty much every part of your life going forward, right? There's two voices now trying to work together to create a mutual outcome. And then we can start looking at our attachment, right? Because we need the communication, the nervous system skills to actually start healing and resolving that. Then we go into polarity, and then we start going into the things that, like, at least my audience is interested in, and my friends and everything, which is like the kind of idea of conscious relationship, or waking up through a relationship, or being in a relationship that is a growth crucible where you're actually evolving and becoming a better version of yourself. That's kind of like the pinnacle. It's similar to Maslow's hierarchy, right? It's like once you take care of these base needs, you now start actualizing your relationship actualizes its potential, and you actualize your potential inside of relationship.
Conflict resolution is one that, despite Shani and I having this weekly check-in that we have, which has been by far the best thing for our relationship, there's still times where come to almost like a dead end. That's definitely not what I'm looking for, but like a unresolved situation. What's your like step-by-step process for conflict resolution?
I mean, it depends on the kind of conflict that we're dealing with, but I would say this is one place where I'm like, I've got a bookmarked to develop a system. Like I have it, but I haven't spent enough time like fleshing out the actual step by steps. But it's a process of really learning to be able to lay everything out on the table. So all of the things that we're working with, all of the objections and the needs and the values and all of the bits and pieces, can we put it all out on the table? Often the putting out on the table gets really charged so we have to be able to work with the charge. It's like you put something out on the table, the other person doesn't like, they immediately react. We have to be like, no, this is the period where we're putting things on the table of what's important to us so we can sift through it and make sense of what's actually here to find an outcome. So that process of being able to kind of empty out what's important to us here and what's going on for us and bring it all onto the table starts to create a level of objectivity. And then we need to get into a mutual objectivity around that, like a shared meta perspective. And so once it's all on the table, then we can look at it from above. So we have a meta perspective and everything's there, and start, now you can start moving stuff around and finding different ways that things connect and work together. And it becomes a collaborative or a shared process. We recognize that we are looking for the best outcome, or a win-win-win outcome, which is going to be a novel outcome. Right. And novel meaning that like we couldn't have thought on it until we've done this process. We couldn't have conceived of it. It didn't exist until we put everything on the table. So we could start creating unique combinations of solutions.
The thing that stands out to me off the back of that, and I feel very fortunate to be in this position, which I know a lot of people aren't. And from what I've seen, I feel like you've done a post on this as well. The fact that we're a partnership, and like truly a partnership, as opposed to being fucking at war, which way too many couples are at war with each other, makes conflict resolution feel safer and more grounded, knowing that we actually have the best interests of the relationship, as opposed to this undercurrent of like me versus you, I'm trying to find a way to win. I can only assume that's a common theme of like, there's a safety and a grounding in conflict resolution when you know you're on the same page.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's something that we have to work very hard at establishing if we're not very good at doing that. You can't have a relationship when you're at war with each other. You're just waiting out a death sentence. It's like, it's inevitable. The end will come. A partnership is a partnership. A relationship doesn't exist without that. So we have to learn how to get side by side. We have to learn to act collaboratively, for sure.
It kind of sounds obvious, but I don't know. My experience, like watching a lot of people, and you can sense when someone's in a partnership and when they're kind of like at war together, even if it's subtle. But like from my experience watching couples, I'd say 1 in 10 have a really clean. Yeah. Would you, like, based on your experience, say it's something similar?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, maybe even less.
Yeah, cool.
Because the thing about relationship that's so challenging is that relationship is a mixture of similarities and differences, right? The similarities is what creates our friendship. That's what creates the feeling of like, I'm best buddies with this person. Like my wife is my best friend without a doubt, right? It's like, because we have a lot of similarities, so which means we have a shared vision and shared idea of what we want to do in the future and shared interests, right? But the differences is what creates our attraction, right? If I only wanted a best buddy, I'd be living with a dude, right? Like who's even more similar with me, right? So there are differences. There are differences in the way the female brain processes emotions. There are differences in things that we need. There's those different attachment styles that are drawn to each other, right? So what happens is those differences become oppositional rather than honored or celebrated, right? The fact that I process emotions differently than her can become a point of contention versus a point of understanding. So we don't let ourselves, and this is a real problem, because what happens then is we go to war trying to force the other person to be the same as us. Whereas if they did become the same as us, we would lose all erotic tension completely. There would be no romantic or erotic energy to sustain that relationship. They have to have differences, and we have to learn to celebrate and honor those differences. So big part of that is learning to really love how this person is different than us and like respect that.
I think Alison Armstrong talks about this when she refers women trying to make their husbands their best girlfriend. They're the perfect girlfriend. I'm like, fuck, man, I can see that way too
thinking
much.
Of men as hairy women. You know, they're not hairy women. They're men.
That's super insightful. Mate, social media is a really busy space, as many of us are all coming back into kind of 4 months. Just listening to wiring as we speak a few things that are so valuable, so insightful.
Oops, I lost a little bit of reception. Come back. There you are again.
Sorry, mate. I'll be able to cut this bit in. Where did I cut out?
You only just started talking about social media.
Okay. All right. Social media is a very, very busy space, and there's a lot of noise going on. But your work in particular for me over the last 3 months, and again, I don't know what you've shifted, but it's really like in my vision, is someone that I actively stop and read with real presence, just in terms of the learnings and the insights that I gain from you. So I appreciate the work that you're putting out. In terms of you, where's the best spot for people to find out more about you and the work that you do?
You can start off by looking me up on social media if you prefer. Facebook, it's a personal page. My name, Damien Bohler, or Instagram @EvolveRelating. I also post random stuff on Threads. I'm a little bit more provocative on Threads when I feel like it. And then there's also my email list, which is going to get a lot more busy. And I'll give you a link. Obviously, you can put in the show notes. There's a link, and then I actually keep all of my resources in one platform. So in my community platform, there's a free part of my community platform where past more deeper dive articles are there, articles that I write with my partner, my YouTube videos that I've just started a YouTube channel, and there is a podcast with my wife starting soon when we get around to it. We've been talking about that for a while. But yeah, signing up to my mailing list, if you really want to stay in the loop, is the best way. Otherwise, follow me on social media until you want to sign up to my mailing list.
Yeah, and I don't know if everything that you post on Facebook is crossing over to Instagram these days, but just some of the ones
when I can.
Yeah.
Not so always. It's more of an effort to get on Instagram, but I do put reels on Instagram, and I'm getting back into them as well. So
yeah. It's a lot of your magic I've taken from your Facebook. So, mate, I appreciate the work that you do. It's like I'm just kind of still processing many of the learnings that I've taken on from today, and no doubt others will when they listen to it as well.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Thanks for having me. It was a great chat.